Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Nobu with Nobu, the All-American Shaman. Nobu, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, thanks as always for being here. Today, we are going to be exploring the plant medicine cannabis. Could you maybe give us your first off, your shamanic perspective on this plant?
Um, Very feminine, very much like the plant, very sedentary. Does not play well with ayahuasca. Can play well with bufo. Can be used after combo ceremonies. Can be used in conjunction with iboga for managing nausea. When I was sitting with iboga, I was served, some cannabis to smoke, and it quelled the nausea because you have to keep the wood down. Um, it's it's very commonly it has a lot of potential to be used in strong spiritual contexts for development, and also in conjunction with fields and other energy tools to enhance overall energy sensitivity. But the same thing that make it um good in that aspect for increasing one's psychic abilities temporarily is also why people can become dependent upon it or make themselves just too heady and not grounded.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things I'll dig into on what you said there, but can we start with the feminine aspect? I guess maybe you could like why or how or like how that manifests. You mentioned in the previous episode on tobacco that it was more masculine. I guess like kind of where do those polarities like originate from when it comes to a plant?
So kind of the essence as well. But I mean, some people would argue, for example, when we say like masculine and feminine, some people will say, well, the Amazonian women, or what was a one warrior race of women that was matriarchal, they'll say, well, the feminine used to be this. And again, just like fields, things operate not via laws, but by patterns. In this current state of being, I would view things through this lens, and you're hearing it in my perspective as well. Some people might, I've never heard anyone interpret tobacco as feminine, but if they do, I'm
Mm.
sure they have the reasons for it. But let's look at tobacco and cannabis at a very like raw level. Okay, if you get tobacco, you want it to be dry as possible, correct? For
Right.
90% of applications I can think of, other than drinking tea to purge, you want it to be dry. Again, like the sun, hot, fire, fuego. Then if you want some good cannabis that's sticky icky, it's a completely different, and there's this pungency to it, thickness, the terpenes, the oils. With tobacco, it's not this juicy, voluptuous thing, or it's this
Mm.
much more, again, harsh um energy. And I talked before about with how tobacco episode about how in the Amazon, the different shamans there pride themselves on whose tobacco puts the others in more pain, like more suffering is inflicted. And,
Right.
you know, even like sitting with like a Sananga, like there's a certain, and that's needed. Just like sometimes in life, like wrath is not always, uh, a thing of hatred. It can be out of love, right? When you yell at your son for going almost to getting hit by a car, it's not because you hate him. It's because you need to get his attention, and you need to do it in a very quick manner. When
Hmm.
the masculine energy of iboga told me, boy, sit down, and it just put a loop of images in front of me in the glowing hot rocks of the sweat lodge, of seeing my mistakes and the choices I made. And it was not pleasant. It was not fun. It wasn't this emotional or sensory pleasant experience. It was very
Mm.
harsh. Again, just like, and then again, look what men with testosterone tend to do. There's war, there's, that killing off things. So going back to these two plants as well, tobacco also is a vermifuge. It kills things. It's anti-parasitic, as we discussed before, with overriding their insect's nervous system. Cannabis doesn't have the same medicinal components. It's much more mother mercy, soothing
Mm.
your pain, CBD, the components of it. Does that shine light on that dynamic?
Yeah, and I guess kind of thinking in the maybe stereotypical descriptions of the effects of cannabis, it's more like toward creativity, maybe artistic outlets, like thinking outside the box, more of this creative nature, which I would tend to associate with the more feminine side of things, like the females create life. They're the ones that are more like nurturing and kind of take more of that almost like chaos energy of the universe and like work with it to create new things and transform things. And like on the more masculine side, like, I think of that as being like more logical driven and more like grounded and rooted in like the black versus white than like the shades of gray in between. Is that maybe a fair assessment as well?
Yes, sir. Also, we can look at within the business world as well, like the the image of the Andrew Tate with the fat cigar in his mouth, or the Alex Hormozy talking about his latest nicotine administration, route. Uh, there's the tobacco is usually used for getting shit done. I'm not saying it can't be used to escape, but it's not really an escapism drug or medicine. Again, it's much more like there's get to work type of thing. People use it to work and study and perform for prolonged periods of time. Most people are not able to use the, you know, nurturing energy of cannabis to the same degree. I'm not saying there's again exceptions to everything, but generally speaking, stereotypes do exist for a reason.
So you mentioned escapism, which is something that I've contemplated a lot, and I will admit to myself and to the audience as well. Cannabis has been my substance of choice for most of my adult life. Alcohol never really did it for me as far as making me feel good, and with the ever increasing acceptance and legality of cannabis in where I lived and also just across the country. It was just the thing I kind of gravitated toward, on the weekend to decompress and whatnot. But I took it too far from my own, judgment of my own actions, and I think the escapism was what I was going for. And then I also think that it had almost like a self-fulfilling loop where the more I escaped, the more I wanted to escape. And I kind of was living in this other dimension more so than my perhaps reality. And I think the just continued habit of doing so made these like two different worlds kind of like drift apart from each other. And I think a lot of negative results occurred due to it. And as folks know, we announced like an addiction release program that Nobu is facilitating, that I am currently a part of and going through to release my attachment to this plant medicine. I do perhaps in the future see a place in my life for it, but now that I have a son, he's 9 months old, and just family responsibilities and much more um, 3D, needs and tasks and productivity and grounded type of existence that I'm living these days. I just realized that this kind of escape and dealing in more of this kind of free flowing energy and maybe more feminine energy wasn't necessarily serving me well. So, could you maybe talk about um, how it's used in more dedicated sacred ceremony space versus maybe what someone like myself who was just like kind of casually lighting up uh, on a random time of day without really putting any sort of maybe respect that it deserved around it. Can you maybe talk about your perspective there?
Yeah. So it's very common after a bufo ceremony or ayahuasca ceremony, or even before a combo ceremony. And I'll explain why this is for these different practices. To use hape or rape before or after. And the reason why, for example, like after bufo or ayahuasca, you're having this very, again, astral, four-dimensional, upper chakra experience. Not saying you don't experience things in your body, you do, but it's a much more visionary, psychedelic experience. And so for people, if the retreat ends at, you know, 12 noon on Sunday and people need to go back to their vehicles and drive an hour to the airport, getting them grounded out in their body as quickly as possible is in your benefit. Also, too, if someone's having a bad, I've had before where with psilocybin, I think I've said this before, with psilocybin ceremonies, of where if someone was in a loop or again just completely out of it and needed to get sedated in a way because they were harming themselves, I shoot hot up their nose, and they would ground them. It would knock them out of the loop. You know, we can look at this from the chemical level, the acetylcholine and the dopaminergic factors, or we can again look at that grounding force, and it just again recentering the body and into the physicality. Because like I remember my first time getting started hopping, I could just feel electricity running through my body. It was like wild to me. It was a completely new experience. But and then conversely, before combo, I sometimes like to serve people Hape because the nicotine content in it can also make them have a bowel movement. So I'd much rather someone have to go do a number 2 before the combo than have
Mm.
to do one without their own choice during combo. And then also furthermore, it also grounds them into their body more before the experience, so it can help alleviate fear. Before psilocybin ceremonies, I will use Sananga before. I won't serve someone Hape usually before psilocybin ceremony because I don't want to just ground them just to bring them back up again. But I'll use Sananga because it's very good at dispelling fear in that way and purgative. But anyways, so just as tobacco is used in that context, we can look at cannabis in the opposite context. So during the experience of iboga, when you're getting your ass kicked by grandfather, and when I say he kicks your ass, he kicks your ass, the gentle, soothing touch of some Santa Maria can be what you need to get through the experience. If you are doing yoga, which is a more yin, feminine type of movement practice, Santa Maria synergizes quite well with that. In fact, I would say, whereas tobacco is not going to be in your best interest for doing some yoga, to vasoconstrictor for one, heavily so with the nicotine. But yeah, does that shine light on that sphere?
Yeah, and I think maybe just also kind of wanted you to maybe elucidate some of the advice that you were giving me around treating
Ah,
cannabis with more kind of respect and sacredness, because I think maybe because it's so available these days and so prevalent, and like there's dispensaries all over the place, and you can just get like a pre-roll and light it up, and it's super easy and convenient. Perhaps it's lost some of its like I guess the respect or sacredness around the use of it.
yes. So one, just like anything, having its time and place. Just like when we put a working harness on a dog for a canine unit, it knows now it's time to work. So people, when exploring these different tools, these substances, they have to have. This is why having rituals and having practices in place is important on many dimensions, both for protection, both for honoring spirits, honoring, your ancestors, protection, setting open the containers, placing intentions, getting everyone's attention, and then getting connection, especially when you're managing a group of people in a ceremony space. But then also now you've created, from a psychological perspective, you've created this series of tasks that need to trigger in order for certain things to get accessed. So, for example, like for me to sit with combo, the set of triggers to trigger that event are, well, I need to fast. I need to have water prepared the night before. I need to have a bucket. I need to have my stuff laid out. I need to have an early wake up time. I need to set aside this time. So people aren't consciously, if someone's just not consciously engaging with anything, it's going to lose a lot of that weight, and it's easier for it to become mindless. So this is again why having intention behind it. So I mean, that's why I told you before, and if you're using the substance and you're using it in conjunction with sound bowls or toning or meditation, for example, there's a yogic practice. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. You'll have to Google search it. Everyone else, but their sadhana essentially is to be stoned for a very long period of time. And when I say stoned, I don't mean they're smoking. I mean they're getting given cannabis tea, again, because it still carboxylizes at a certain temperature, even the tea that's needed to activate the THC component. And they just keep them stoned for, I want to say it's like weeks or months at a time, just this perpetual
Mm.
state of being stoned. And I don't know if anyone who's ever overdone it on edibles knows what that feels like to green out. it's not a pleasant time, and you can vomit, and the sensations in your body are very, very strange. It's a very surreal experience. I would say it's like kind of reminds me of. Did you ever see Lord of the Rings?
The first one.
Okay. Do you know like when not Bilbo, Frodo puts the ring on, how like he sees the Nazgul and like he can see in like that interdimensional state? You know,
Yeah.
I would say that like greening out with cannabis kind of feels like that, of where you're at this heightened state of energy awareness, but you're so overwhelmed by feeling. Again, I talked this before about cannabis increases psychic awareness and psychic skills. That's why, again, it's used by artists like Lil Wayne and Snoop Dogg and, you know, Post Malone and everyone else, and myself included. Again, I use it before I do energy work. Yesterday, I worked on my father, and beforehand, I was smoking a J, you know, to get myself more energetically sensitive to do the job. Just as in the opposite sense of like a surgeon washes their hands, you know, they prepare the room for a shaman. These different substances all serve different roles within my own healing practice. Because if I become more sensitive, I become more aware, I can heal more, I can feel more. So begin, but that's using it consciously and intentionally. So
Hmm.
that's where we always have to be self-aware with the use of a substance, of like, what is my goal? What is my series of tasks ahead of this? You know, is it smoke a J and then just like doom scroll? Or is it smoke a J and go drum or go write some music or paint some art, you know, or go walk out in nature? It's always a choice. And that's what the aim is. Does that
Yeah.
do the job, brother?
Yes, yes. Thank you for revisiting that question. Could you maybe also talk about in your work as a life coach? I mean, folks like myself, I feel like for me, perhaps it was the potency that seems to have increased at an exponential rate, and I think maybe just because when you roll a joint and like historically back when I started smoking, like the cannabis I was getting was probably pretty weak. So we were rolling like whole joints and smoking it, and then like feeling a certain level of effect. But then over time, if you roll the same size joint and you got like 30% THC in there, like it's going to blast you off to another dimension, so to speak. And I feel like that's kind of what happened to me. Is it got stronger and stronger and stronger, but I kept on smoking the same amount. And I've been reading articles about THC induced psychosis and things like that, and kind of having these like almost like episodes of losing myself. Can you maybe talk about what you've seen in your work as a coach and a shaman in that regard?
I actually experienced my initial like Kundalini awakening experience when I was using cannabis. It was during my first juice fast in New York, and I was outside perineum tanning. For those who don't know what that means, it means I was getting sun on my ass, and I was hitting on a vape pen, and I had like more intense ego dissolution and experience than it's funny, I've not told many people this, but fuck it, here we go. I experienced being on the cross, and it was very fucking painful. And I was
Wow.
screaming so loud that my uh neighbor, she came over to check on me. The pain,
Mm.
like, it was, again, it wasn't long in terms of like real world time. I would say it was like less than like 2 minutes, but it was agonizing. Like, it was like full body pain. It was very palpable, very surreal, like feeling like the weight of all the sins and like the love and like the ecstasy and intimacy of betrayal. Like,
Mm.
very, very poignant experience. And I suspect that most people who are put into hospitals due to psychosis of varying, or because they're crazy, is, or a lot of schizophrenics as well, is because it's improperly guided or initiated Kundalini awakening experiences, waking up that serpent, waking up that light primal, again, very feminine aspect too as well, life force. And again, cannabis opens up your aura and opens up your sensitivity, but if you're not protected, right? Or again, if you start opening up nadis and meridians in your body and increasing and blasting yourself with this, spirit that's going to do so, but you don't have any proper, again, exercise, grounding, hydration, good diet, all these other pieces, which a lot of people who get stoned don't do. This I can see as being very well a breeding ground for psychosis or getting just shattered by one's in an electrical field or possessed, a combination of the various factors.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little more as far as like the aura? I know we talked about it in the alcohol episode of your kind of auric defenses are perhaps lowered and your energy field is open, thus allowing other entities, whether they be good or bad, in. Could you talk about like
Yes.
how much cannabis does that?
Yes, thank you. That's a good point to make. So what I would claim, my perspective again, is that when people experience anxiety or paranoia with cannabis, which I know is a common experience for some people, is that the reason why is because now they're hearing other people's thoughts more. They're becoming more psychic, and now they don't know how to differentiate between who's and who in the zoo.
Mm.
This is another reason why with my life coaching, and some people take forever to take the bait, but I will not stop prescribing meditation, because until you learn to be and just be and observe your own energy in all its various forms and dimensions, you cannot go around working with other people's energies or other energies, because you haven't even identified yet what is you and what is not you. So you don't even know when you've become infected.
Mm.
We talked about before about like the contrast of juicing. Like, you don't even know that you're sick or you're getting more sick because you didn't establish a baseline to begin with of like what your energy signature is in all these different capacities. And now you're going to throw in cannabis in the mix, and you're going to go out in public, and you wonder why you're feeling so much. Because, well, again, you're feeling so much and you don't know how to differentiate between, different energy signatures.
So it's like it kind of just instantly lowers your. Is it like a defense mechanism? Is it like your aura just kind of like expands? Like what's like way to visualize like the effect there, and maybe ways to address it if you find yourself not able to differentiate between yourself and the outside.
I wouldn't say it's changing your aura like the same way like alcohol puts holes in the aura. Cannabis is just making your own self more energetically sensitive and aware. Again, it's that feminine energy connecting to the matrix. So you're picking up more energy. On this note, this is also why as I said earlier, why using cannabis in conjunction with morphic fields can be to one's benefit. Because by
Mm.
increasing your energy sensitivity, you are able to, again, provide one's like actively meditating on and working with the field, consciously, again, where attention goes, energy flows, in this heightened awareness, they can experience more sensations. I've had like, breakthroughs with different fields. And I've used Bufo. Again, I use Bufo with testing a lot of fields in the past because of how potent of a psychedelic it is. It just makes it very clear if something does what it says it does.
Mm. Could you maybe talk about the differences, indica, sativa, from maybe a more shamanic perspective of what the effects of those two different types of strands are?
Yeah, as far as I don't have like any sort of in depth, but just my own personal experience, I prefer indicas because they're more in body for when I'm working out or if I'm doing massage. Whereas if I'm doing creating fields or I'm doing distance shamanic work or my energy work, I prefer sativas because they're much more like upper chakra and much more of a heady thing. And again, in terms of like the sativa and the sativa is more masculine than the indica because again, the indica is more leaning into that couch lock and just being in one's body, whereas the sativa still has some more stimulating properties.
Hmm. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of stuck on my next question. You got it. What else should we talk about here, Nobu? What other
Uh,
aspects of this plant should we explore?
how cannabis reveals blocked energy centers. So, Nobu, why do people get the munchies or get really thirsty or have these various or very horny or the various increases and shifts in their behavior when they smoke? Okay, good question. So, it's increasing. Again, I said before, it's increasing your energy sensitivity. So now, someone in their sober state, again, let's just say they're using 2% of the RAM and CPU of their human organism. And let's just say that, for just the sake of this argument, that when they use Bufo, they're using 75% of their RAM in consciousness. Let's say during ayahuasca, it's 50%. Let's say during psilocybin, it's 25%. Say with alcohol, it's like 5%. And then with cannabis, it's like 10%. Like, they're now using a great, again, that's why they're picking up on people's thoughts. They're able to feel energy more. The clair skills come out. The nadis and the meridians start opening, which again can cause that psychosis or kundalini awakening experience. And they're able to feel the different energy signatures more profoundly. So if they've had, any sort of built up energy in their sacral chakra, well, that can manifest as being very creative, which again, a lot of artists do in terms of making music and art, etc. Or in the negative polarity, it could be being extremely lustful and an absolute horn dog. With the solar plexus, which I personally dealt with myself in fact, cannabis for me is a really good gauge on how my solar plexus is doing, because I combo's the best medicine for it, but by God, is it hard. Uh, and like, I can tell how my solar plexus is very quickly from cannabis, because if I get bad cravings, again, we look at this from a gut bio perspective, and then also the spiritual perspective. If I'm strong and solid down here, then again, the cannabis didn't introduce anything per se. It may open up a portal, but like I didn't invite anything in through it in the same way of the context of alcohol or eating food. But
Mm.
now, if I'm having cravings, okay, well, that means my gut biome is messed up. That means my solar plexus is messed up. If I'm getting this excess of hunger when I'm not doing anything. Granted, we could argue, well, you're using increased processing degree and processing more sensory information, but I don't think it's that big of a difference. I know for me that it generally means it shows me what my state is. And then with water, the throat, people who are dehydrated, most people also, by the way, from my opinion, interpret what is thirst as hunger. They eat when they should just be drinking or having more
Mm.
hydration, but that's another topic. When people have, you know, headaches or the red eyes or, squinty vision, like, I know there's times where cannabis does that to me, where I feel like everyone in the world could just see in my face, you have like the sunken in eyes. It's
Right.
symptomatic of the third eye chakra. Whereas there's other times where, like, I've been high and I look clear as day. I feel great. Like, also, being outside in nature too with Santa Maria is generally better than being in a dark room, which, again, the
For
contrast the
all plant
contrast there is,
medicines. Yeah.
yeah, is very palpable. It's very palpable, the energetics. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like
My
when
question.
I am sorry, say it again.
I said my question, but continue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for answering your question for the audience. Um, yeah, I mean, maybe it's just like my own personal experience with it, but I feel like I start getting like these ideas and like it's like this flood of new ideas and new ways of thinking about things. And in the moment, it feels like epiphanies, like one after the other. Like, wow, this is totally going to change like everything in my life. I've thought about these things in completely new ways. And then I'll, come down and like the next day maybe like reality kind of sinks in. It's like, oh, that wasn't necessarily very realistic. Like, was that just delusional? I think the big thing that I keep coming back to as to like kind of why that happens is time. And I think when I am under the influence of cannabis, like time feels like it doesn't really exist, or like you can collapse it and you can like think into the future really far as if you can manifest things instantaneously. But then like when you're kind of back back from the experience, then you realize like, oh no, this is still the 3D plane, this is still earth. Like, it takes effort and consistency and action like day in and day out to then get to that goal. Could you maybe talk about the relation of between like perception of time and the influence of cannabis?
The perception of time. That's something I don't really have personal experience. Like, I don't have that. But what I would say is this: two things I can see with causing the issue of not having the manifestation occur the way you want to. One is if you have an idea, it needs to get one expressed or channeled immediately. You know, that falls for anything, right? In a sober state or a uh journey or experience of any kind. That's why people bring journals with them to ayahuasca and bufo. You know, write this down as it comes to you, because you're gonna lose it.
Mm,
Integration is huge. And I'm not trying to turn this into a coaching psychotherapy session with you, JT, but if you don't already have an intention going into the use of the cannabis, chances are you don't have a closing and you don't have an
mm,
integration, channel. So, again, just like Bufo, we prepare and then we close, we ground out, we close the container, we have, follow up afterwards. The same way, if you applied those techniques to cannabis, you might have a different reality.
mm,
I've seen it so many times on various discords and other like YouTube comments of where people use a field or a subliminal in conjunction with cannabis, and they do have that freak manifestation. And I know how, because again, it's increasing energy sensitivity. They're more able to interact with it and able to manifest it. But they're probably, again, there's so many factors at play. Like, what's your auric health compared to theirs? What's your subconscious mindset surrounding manifesting? What's theirs? You know, again, how are you closing a container? Are you following it up? What's the consistency of it? So there's a lot of factors there. But as far as the time dilation, the only thing that comes to mind is just that it's a plant energy. It's a different type of plant energy. It's just very chill.
mm.
It's not in a hurry. Again, it's not like tobacco or caffeine or ephedrine, nicotine, INE, caffeine, INE, ephedrine, INE, stimulants, drive, go.
Yeah.
Cannabis, not
Yeah,
the
it's kind of
same.
funny with cannabis. I feel like it affects people like one of two ways. Like my one friend will like pass out or like go to sleep pretty much instantly or like shortly thereafter. Whereas me, like it keeps me awake. Like it feels almost like a stimulant where I'm up for like the next 4 hours, kind of like regardless of how tired I am. Like my mind will start kind of racing. Is that maybe what's your perspective on why it affects people in such drastically different ways?
I would say it's just individual chakra health and then also astro. Because I've experienced both of those paradigms. I've experienced
Mm,
times where cannabis, I've slept for 12 hours, you know, and then there's other times where I've just been up till 3 in the morning working.
mm.
I think again, like I'm not at least very static. I change a lot. I go through evolutions, but everyone's different. Yeah.
And on the dream aspect, I know myself and was kind of reading up on online about this too. When folks who are consistent, like daily smokers of cannabis, and then they'll dial it back or try to go cold turkey with it, your dreams will start becoming like very vivid and like frequent, and like every night you'll have like almost lucid dreams. Could you
As they should
talk
be.
about yeah, yeah, I guess so you could talk about like maybe why under the influence of regular cannabis use do you lose that?
You're running that circuit again. You are becoming more energetically sensitive, and you are again the nadis, the meridians, which again leads to that kundalini experience, potentially a psychosis. You're running more energy through the system at that state, simulating the state that it's supposed to be at night, which again is more dreamlike, more more of that astral realm. Which again is fine if you're getting high, if you're getting out of your body, for an hour or so. But when you keep on doing it, you're burning that bridge more. It's not nearly as strong. Again, it's just tolerance. I mean, tolerance in the physical sense and also in the spiritual sense. Um,
Mm.
just like how people like become suicidal as they just become more and more intolerant of their physical body.
So it's like you kind of use up the dream state like during your waking hours, so it's kind of like spent. You like spent that you spent that money already before you go to sleep, so there's like nothing left when you're trying to dream.
Yeah, and do you recall what I told you all as well when about cannabis after a Bufo experience?
To don't do it because you might get a what is
Reactivation.
it called? Reactivation. That's the
Reactivation.
word. Yeah.
So I can't remember, and I'm sorry for those out there and call me out. Thank you, Instagram. I can't remember. I can't remember the exact chemical process here off the top of my head, but just as we talked about before, like light and blue light and melatonin, and then its relationship downstream to DMT, which is produced endogenously within the brain. But again, when we take, higher exogenous amounts in the form of bufo, gracias toad, then, again, our brain and our bodies get filled with more of that substance. And again, it doesn't just go away all right away. I mean, there's still like left over in the body and, which then could be reactivated. Reactivations usually occur at night for people. They'll wake up and they'll be back in the medicine experience. Or they also happen when people smoke cannabis. So there's a similar thing of where, again, when you go to sleep, you can have a reactivation and go back into the DMT world. Or with cannabis, it can reactivate as well. And that's also why I said that cannabis does play well with bufo. In fact, if someone has an extremely high tolerance for bufo, what I would call subconscious rigidity or a very resilient ego, or a lot of demons, then cannabis can be used to, again, open them up in that more feminine energy, to prime them for that medicine. So can blue lotus and white lotus flower as well, but cannabis is good as well.
Interesting. So yeah, like so the reactivation is because you get put in almost like this dreamlike state um like so dreams and cannabis use get your mind into that similar state related to the DMT. So something like bufo will you'll kind of like be back in that experience of being under the medicine again.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't remember the exact chemical pathways off the top of my head right now, but I can't keep
Yeah,
everything as a
that's why the
library.
internet exists. Yeah. Trying to think of so I guess you mentioned Lil Wayne and Snoop Dogg before as kind of like these maybe exceptions to the rule that can maintain success in the 3D realm while being uh, basically high 24/7, according to some of their lyrics and interviews and things like that. Could you maybe talk about how or what you think's going on with that ability? Is it just like you're saying, like their chakras and like the way their energy systems are?
Combination of factors. So yeah, their own astro, their own chakras. People who are Scorpios or I would say also Pisces, but especially Scorpios, because they're ruled by Pluto and it's just very dark and deep and very emotional. They can handle usually lots of cannabis. So far, every Scorpio I've met is just a complete tank with that. It's ridiculous. But from the chakras perspective as well. But furthermore, what I wanted to say initially, I just wanted to follow up to it, is that the artist is the modern day shaman. Lil Wayne and Snoop Dogg might not be saying like, "Oh, I'm a shaman," but what is someone who make music or art doing for people? They're taking their pain and their experience and they're transmuting it to provide a shift in frequency or healing, right? How many people have healed through the song after a heartbreak? The song helped them heal, or a song helped them grieve. And music really is magic, in so many different dimensions, from the lyrics, cymatics, from the fields, from the individual instruments, etc. But also, I think it's just a matter of, again, who you are and what your path is in life. And some of that's destiny and some of that's cultivating. Like, I wouldn't have the capacity I do, I don't think, for extremely high doses of various psychedelics if it wasn't for my military experience. I think that primed me and trained me to just endure a suck factor of like 22 dots of combo twice, or massive doses of bufo, and still be fine, like not die and just get back up again or be conscious. So I don't, again, like, so the head tattoo, like I slept through my head tattoo part of it. Like, it's a matter of the priming experience. On that note too, as well, just a quick little segue here. The priestess who first served me bufo, Susie, told me that men who are on steroids or higher levels of testosterone, like TRT, generally don't respond well to bufo as well. And I don't know the chemical reaction for why this would be, but I suspect again, bufo is pretty masculine energy in my opinion. But my again theory is that there's some sort of competing pathway or whatever the spirit is of these different peptides as well does not interact well with the toad.
Mm, interesting. And then, so as far as you're mentioning before, like Hape being used in like psilocybin and bufo ceremonies for grounding, is that like the similar approach if someone were to try to like ground or detox
Do
for cannabis?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I do it all the time. If I need a high to be over, and I need to get back into my body now, serve myself high. Again, it's about using the tools to change your frequency as you need to and see fit. But again, there's it's a slippery slope too. Like again, like when I first started working with Bufo, like I probably had like a 2 month phase where like I was definitely abusing the medicine, you know,
Mm,
and but that's where it kind of like I knew that I was gonna have to like put all the fire in my hands and manage it responsibly, otherwise I would never figure it out. So again, just like we talked about before about like if you have $1 million or unlimited Jing, like what are you going to use it for? You have to have a purpose and a path. So that's again coming back to all these medicines. Intention, 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 intention.
right. Yeah. You fall into the hedonism or whatever if you have unlimited resources and no direction. It's one of your now famous lines in my mind: "A man without purpose falls into pleasure."
So
Um, yeah. So y'all talk about, with myself, and I'm drinking some lemon water here, and you recommended garlic as well, as far as if one finds himself with maybe more of a dependency on cannabis. What are some techniques or helpful hacks to remove it from the system and try to remove some of the attachments?
any sort of lymphatic drainage. Again, I know that if you ask Google, they're going to say I'm wrong, but any sort of lymphatic drainage, because again, that compound, that THC is stored in your body fat, your tissues. So like sweating is going to help. It's going to help cleanse yourself. Apple cider vinegar is a solid one. I wouldn't say binders so much because you're not dealing with like large particulate matter, like parasites or their waste. Lymphatic drainage again, and the lemon's going to do that by proxy as well because lemon helps. It's a very astringent. It pulls things out. That's also why again I recommend you do lemon. And yeah, exercise and do when you feel cravings or you're trying to move past it. Is do something that's more in alignment with what you want to be doing at your time. Because that's part of the reason why the addiction popped up in the first place is because there was a uh shift from the desire, the needed path or purpose. So once you have that, it's like you have your North Star. Now you know when you get distracted, all right, get back on course. Like this is where I need to go. This is what I need to do. Again, shifting from, and that's, I know it's going like the more masculine take of things, but that's intentional because we don't want to like if you're feeling the urge to smoke, I'm not going to tell you to go do like more creative things and go meditate. I'm going to tell you to go do something because the
Mhm.
plant got you into that more passive state to begin with. So we need to course correct and swing over to the right. You know,
Yeah, yeah, that's something we kind of said at the end of the tobacco episode too. It's like tobacco is more of like a manifesting in the 3D realm, whereas cannabis is more of like this ethereal, kind of like other dimensional. So like if you're trying to change your reality around you, then like thinking on it and meditating on it probably isn't going to change the circumstances. So thus, like the opposite approach would be taking action and doing more like kind of grounded and 3 dimensional work.
yes, but I want to say that it's not impossible to manifest things by getting high and meditating. It is possible. Anything is possible, but if that approach isn't working for someone, right?
Mm,
And again, there's some people out there who I know who write in a manifestation journal every day and they have dream lives. People who like study Neville Goddard and that type of work. That's not my specialty, but I'm just
mm,
from my experience and what I prescribe as a life coach, it's like I'm not going to have someone continue to do the patterns or similar things that got them into a negative state. We're going to, flip flop.
right. Yeah, yeah. I guess with all these different substances, it's very case by case on how it affects your physiology. So self awareness, I guess, on how it's impacting you. And I mean, I guess, and I know people as well that can work totally fine and actually probably better and be more productive when they're stoned. Which for myself, I know that's not necessarily the
Oh,
case.
Kodak.
But yeah, everyone has their different physiology and chemical reactions. Yeah. Any last words or comments for the audience, Nobu?
If you're gonna get high or engage with Santa Maria, just have intention and sacredness surrounding it. That's all.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nobu, for another delve into the plant medicine world. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.